Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that your phone no longer connects to the internet, your GPS has stopped working, your television is nothing but static, and every digital transfer of money or information has suddenly failed. At first, you might think it's just a local outage, maybe a storm knocked out a cell tower or a power line somewhere, but soon you realize, as you step outside into a city filled with confusion, that this is not a small disruption. This is global. Planes are grounded, ships are stranded, banks are closed, and no one can even predict the weather anymore. This is not a temporary failure. This is what it would look like if we lost access to space. Because so much of the world we take for granted rests quietly, invisibly, on satellites orbiting far above our heads, woven into the very fabric of modern life. For most people, space feels distant, something seen in documentaries, science fiction, or through a telescope on a clear night. It is easy to believe that space exploration is just about astronauts, rockets, and distant planets, but the truth is that space is not just out there, it is down here with us, silently working every second. Satellites are the beating heart of the communication and navigation systems we rely on. They are the reason you can make a video call to a friend across the world, the reason ships navigate safely across oceans, the reason farmers can predict rain, and the reason you can find your way home on a dark night using a small device in your pocket. If those satellites were gone, whether from a catastrophic event, conflict in orbit, or simply the decay of technology, our world would descend into a chaos we are not prepared for. Think of communication first. Satellites carry signals that allow global broadcasting, international phone calls, and internet coverage for even the most remote regions of Earth. If they were suddenly gone, the digital connection between nations would be broken. Businesses that rely on real-time communication would collapse overnight. Banks, which use satellites to timestamp transactions and synchronize systems, would experience failures that could freeze economies. Even the simple act of withdrawing money from an ATM would be interrupted because the global network of transactions depends on precise timing and data transmission from space. A world without space would be a world without financial trust, and without financial trust, societies tremble. Now consider navigation. Every time you use Google Maps or a car's GPS to find your destination, you are depending on a constellation of satellites above the Earth. These satellites provide location services with incredible precision, down to meters or even centimeters. But navigation isn't just about convenience when driving. Airlines use GPS to guide flights safely across continents and oceans. Cargo ships carrying food, oil, and vital goods use it to chart their course across vast seas. Emergency responders depend on it to find accident sites, stranded hikers, or disaster zones. Farmers use GPS to operate precision equipment that plants, waters, and harvests with efficiency that feeds billions of people. The collapse of navigation satellites would not just inconvenience us, it would paralyze the movement of people, goods, and services across the planet. Imagine airports without functioning radar support from space-based systems. Airplanes would be grounded indefinitely, creating a global standstill. Millions of passengers would be stranded in terminals. Fresh goods like fruit, vegetables, and medical supplies that rely on fast air transport would rot. Meanwhile, ships at sea would be forced to rely on centuries-old methods of navigation, and many would be lost to storms or accidents. It would be as if humanity had suddenly been hurled back into an earlier age, not because of a lack of ingenuity, but because we ignored the importance of the silent infrastructure we had once built in the skies. Weather forecasting would also vanish because satellites are the eyes we use to track storms, hurricanes, floods, and droughts. Without space-based observation, we would no longer have early warnings for disasters. Cyclones would strike coastlines without warning, families would not have time to evacuate, entire cities could be flattened with little preparation, costing millions of lives, farmers would be unable to predict rainfall or drought, leading to food shortages. The collapse of communication and navigation from space would not only harm the economy, it would directly endanger survival itself. What makes this scenario even more striking is how invisible it is to the average person today. We use GPS without thinking. We turn on the news and trust the weather report without questioning where the data comes from. We move money around the world digitally in fractions of a second. Yet few stop to realize that these luxuries are not simply the product of computers on Earth. They depend on the constant relay of information between Earth and orbit. Satellites are not just machines floating above us, they are threads in a delicate web that keeps the world connected. Break those threads and the web collapses. To understand the seriousness, let us imagine one day in detail. You wake up and discover your phone has no signal. Not just no Wi-Fi, but no mobile network at all. The towers are functioning, but the satellites that coordinate timing and signal paths have failed. You get into your car to drive to work, only to discover that your GPS no longer functions. Traffic signals, which rely on synchronized timing, begin to fail, causing massive gridlock. Planes have been grounded at every airport. The television channels display old footage because live feeds cannot be transmitted. Farmers preparing to plant crops have lost access to precision equipment guidance, and a massive storm is building in the ocean with no one able to track its course. Banks are flooded with people demanding cash, but digital transfers are frozen because the systems that provide exact timing verification, timing that comes from atomic clocks aboard satellites, are no longer functioning. By evening, the world has slipped into panic. Stores run out of essentials. Governments scramble to maintain order, all because we lost something we thought was untouchable: space. This is not science fiction. This is fragility hidden in plain sight. Space-based systems are vulnerable. They can be disrupted by solar storms, collisions with debris, or deliberate acts of war. Thousands of satellites orbit Earth, but space is also littered with fragments of old rockets, broken machines, and tiny pieces of debris traveling at speeds faster than bullets. One collision can create thousands more fragments, threatening everything else in orbit. Experts call this the Kessler syndrome, a chain reaction of destruction in orbit that could render space unusable for decades. If such a chain reaction ever occurred, communication and navigation satellites could be wiped out, and humanity would suddenly face the very scenario I just described. The importance of space for communication and navigation extends beyond technology. It touches human culture and identity. Consider the billions of people in developing nations who have never had access to stable infrastructure, but today can connect with the rest of the world thanks to satellite internet and phones. Space has given the voiceless a voice, the isolated a connection, and the powerless a chance to participate in a global community. To lose space is to silence those voices again, to plunge the disconnected back into darkness. And it is not only about individuals, it is about entire nations. Economies today are interwoven through global trade, shipping, and finance. Without satellite coordination, shipping routes collapse, stock markets freeze, and the very concept of globalization falls apart. A nation might survive isolated, but our world has become one vast interconnected machine. Remove the gears in orbit and the machine stops working. But the collapse of communication and navigation is not just about losing technology, it is about losing trust. In today's world, we trust that when we call a loved one, the call will go through. We trust that when a plane departs, it will reach its destination. We trust that when we transfer money, it will arrive safely. If those systems vanish, what replaces them? Fear, uncertainty, division. A breakdown of communication leads to a breakdown of cooperation. Misunderstandings between nations could escalate into conflict. Without the stabilizing hand of shared information, suspicion grows, and history has shown us that suspicion often leads to violence. It is sobering to realize that the very foundation of our modern civilization rests on something so fragile. Yet perhaps this realization should not only bring fear, but also awareness. Awareness that space is not a luxury or an optional frontier, but a lifeline. The satellites above us are as vital as the roads we drive on, the power lines that light our homes, and the water pipes that feed our cities. They are invisible infrastructure hidden in the night sky but carrying the weight of the modern world. And so, when we ask what happens if we lose space, we must understand that we are not asking a distant, abstract question. We are asking about the collapse of communication and navigation that underpins every detail of our lives. We are asking about airplanes that no longer fly, ships that no longer arrive, farmers who no longer feed us, and banks that no longer function. We are asking about a world cast into chaos, not by war or plague, but by silence from the skies. To lose space is to lose connection, and to lose connection is to lose civilization as we know it. That is why space must be valued, protected, and respected. Because the collapse of communication and navigation is not just a possibility, it is a warning of what could come if we take for granted the fragile lifelines stretched between Earth and the stars. Space is not out there, it is here with us every second of every day, and without it, the world as we know it vanishes. When we think of security, most of us picture soldiers guarding borders, police officers patrolling streets, or governments making decisions in high halls of power. But in truth, the highest form of security humanity has today does not rest on land or sea, nor even solely in the air. It rests above us in the silent void of space. The satellites and instruments orbiting our planet act as our eyes, our ears, and our watchmen. They track the movement of armies, the growth of storms, the rise of seas, the spread of wildfires, and the tremors of earthquakes. They provide us with an invisible shield that detects threats before they arrive, giving us precious hours or even minutes to prepare. To lose space, therefore, is not only to lose convenience, but to lose safety itself. It is to strip humanity of its capacity to see danger before it strikes, leaving us blind in a world where danger is always present. Imagine the aftermath of a massive storm without satellites. Right now, we have the ability to monitor hurricanes as they form over oceans. We can measure wind speeds, track the storm's course, and issue warnings that save thousands of lives. Families evacuate coastal cities days before landfall. Emergency shelters are opened. Governments prepare supplies. All of this depends on space-based observation. Now imagine a world without those satellites. Hurricanes would strike without warning, coastal towns would be shredded overnight, children would be swept away in floods before anyone even realized a storm was near. Millions of people would die not because nature grew harsher, but because we allowed ourselves to lose the watchful eyes in space that gave us warning. The same applies to earthquakes and tsunamis. Satellites track seismic shifts and ocean patterns, sending data that can trigger alarms before a wave swallows a coastline. Without space-based monitoring, those alarms would remain silent. Entire populations could be wiped out in minutes with no chance to escape. We often assume security means defense from enemies, but true security is protection from all threats, natural, environmental, and human. Space is the only vantage point that allows us to watch them all. Now let us think about wildfires. In recent years, entire nations have watched forests burn, towns reduced to ash, skies darkened with smoke. Space-based systems provide real-time images of fire spread, helping firefighters allocate resources, guiding planes that drop water, and saving countless homes. Without space, those images vanish. Fires would spread unchecked, responders would move blindly, and whole regions could become wastelands before help arrived. Space is not just an abstract frontier. It is a shield for the forests, homes, and families on Earth. But security is not only about natural disasters, it is also about peace among nations. Satellites orbiting Earth monitor the movements of armies, the testing of missiles, and the deployment of military forces. They provide transparency. In a world filled with suspicion, they confirm truths. When one nation prepares for conflict, another knows, not through rumor or hearsay, but through the unblinking eye of satellites. This reduces the chance of misunderstanding, the chance that fear will spark a war. Without these watchful eyes, the balance of power collapses into mistrust. A missile could be launched and no one would know who fired it. Troops could mass at a border, and neighboring nations might assume the worst. Wars would erupt not necessarily because leaders wanted them, but because the lack of knowledge created panic and rash decisions. Consider nuclear weapons. For decades, satellites have played a critical role in monitoring tests and verifying treaties. They detect the heat signatures of launches, the shockwaves of detonations, and the movements of delivery systems. These tools give the international community the ability to enforce agreements and reduce escalation. Without them, treaties become words without proof, nations could cheat undetected, fear would grow unchecked, and in fear, the temptation to strike first becomes stronger. Losing space is not just losing technology, it is losing the fragile fabric of trust that holds back catastrophe. Security also means protecting resources and the environment. Satellites monitor illegal deforestation, overfishing, pollution, and climate change. They reveal the bleaching of coral reefs, the shrinking of glaciers, and the desertification of farmland. Without them, governments and scientists would be blind to slow disasters unfolding over years. The Earth itself would deteriorate in silence until it was too late to act. We often think of security as something immediate, but what is more urgent than the security of food, water, and air? Space is the mirror that shows us our mistakes, the constant reminder of how fragile Earth is. Remove that mirror, and we may only realize the damage when collapse has already arrived. Let us not forget the security of individuals. Satellites allow emergency services to find lost climbers, shipwrecked sailors, or downed aircraft. They enable rescue teams to coordinate across continents during earthquakes, floods, or epidemics. In a crisis, the first question is always, where? Without satellites, that question cannot be answered quickly. Minutes become hours, hours become days, and lives slip away while the world struggles in blindness. Every life saved by rapid response is a quiet reminder of the invisible shield of space. Now imagine a world at war without space. In the modern age, militaries depend heavily on space for coordination, navigation, and communication. But paradoxically, this dependency has also restrained many conflicts, because space provides awareness to all sides. It is difficult to surprise an opponent when satellites can see your movements. Without them, secrecy returns, and secrecy breeds paranoia. Wars could escalate before diplomacy even had a chance to speak. A commander could move forces undetected, and an adversary unaware might assume the worst. The result, strikes, counterstrikes, and global instability. It is not only about human threats, it is also about planetary threats. Space allows us to detect asteroids that could impact Earth. It lets us study the sun's activity to predict solar storms that might knock out power grids. Without space, we would not see these threats until they arrived, leaving us defenseless against the cosmos itself. Security is not only about protecting nations from each other, it is about protecting humanity from the universe we live in. Some might argue that humanity survived for centuries without satellites, so surely we could adapt if they disappeared. But this ignores how deeply space is now woven into our survival. We are no longer a world of small, isolated communities. We are a global civilization, and our systems depend on interconnectedness. What made sense in the 1600s does not make sense today. A farmer in one country depends on fertilizers shipped from another. A child in one nation receives medicine manufactured across the globe. A storm in the Pacific can disrupt markets in Europe. All of these depend on the watchful presence of space-based systems that connect and secure the world. Without them, our complexity becomes our weakness, and collapse becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Picture, if you will, a single event, a massive earthquake strikes a populated region. Today, satellites provide instant images of the devastation, guiding rescuers to the worst-hit areas. They allow international teams to coordinate, to know which roads are blocked, which bridges have fallen, and where survivors are waiting. Supplies are flown in, guided by GPS to exact drop zones. Aid flows efficiently. But in a world without space, the same earthquake strikes and confusion reigns. Weeks pass before the scale of destruction is even known. Rescuers search blindly. Supplies pile up in the wrong places. Survivors die not from the earthquake itself, but from the delay in response. Security without space is not security at all. It is chance, chaos, and failure. The deeper tragedy of losing space lies not only in the immediate disasters, but in the erosion of hope. For generations, space has been a symbol of unity. When humans first looked back at Earth from the moon, they saw no borders, no divisions, only one fragile sphere. That image inspired cooperation, treaties, and the idea that humanity could share responsibility for its survival. But if space becomes lost to us, whether through neglect, conflict, or debris, we lose not only a tool, but a vision. We return to a world of fragmented nations, each blind and alone, each unable to see the larger picture. It is sobering to realize that the same satellites that bring us weather forecasts also prevent wars. The same systems that guide a farmer's tractor also verify peace treaties. The same eyes that show us burning forests also detect incoming missiles. Space is not divided into categories. It is a single network that secures life in all its forms. To lose that is not just to stumble into inconvenience. It is to gamble with survival. We must understand then that space is not an optional frontier, a playground for scientists and astronauts. It is a foundation of security. It is as vital as walls once were to ancient cities, as oceans once were to naval empires, as nuclear deterrence once was to superpowers. To neglect it, to weaponize it recklessly, or to pollute it with debris is to dismantle our shield with our own hands. The question is not whether we can live without space. The question is how long we can survive once it is gone. The loss of global monitoring and security would not announce itself with one great crash, but with countless small failures cascading into disaster. Missed warnings here, misunderstandings there, until one day humanity wakes up in a storm it cannot escape, a war it cannot prevent, or a famine it cannot avoid. That is why the preservation of space is not only a scientific duty but a moral one. We owe it to every life on Earth, to every child yet to be born, to maintain the shield above us. Space is not just the realm of stars and planets. It is the realm of human safety, human cooperation, and human survival. To lose it is to gamble with everything we hold dear, and so when we ask what happens if we lose space, we must see beyond rockets and astronauts. We must see a coastline struck without warning, a city burned unchecked, a treaty broken unseen, a famine unmonitored, a war begun in blindness. We must see the invisible shield shattering, leaving us exposed to a dangerous world, and we must ask ourselves, are we willing to risk it, or will we, with wisdom and unity, protect the security and global monitoring that space provides for ourselves and for generations yet to come? When we speak about the importance of space, we often discuss satellites, technology, navigation, or security. These are critical, practical reasons to value the skies above us. But there is something deeper, something less visible yet perhaps even more essential: inspiration. Space is not only about machines in orbit, it is about meaning, it is about wonder, it is about the fire inside the human spirit that compels us to ask questions, to dream, and to pursue knowledge beyond the limits of what we know. If we were to lose space, we would not only lose satellites, data, or technology, we would lose a part of ourselves. We would extinguish one of the greatest sources of imagination and ambition that humanity has ever known. From the beginning of time, human beings have looked up at the night sky and wondered. Long before telescopes, long before rockets, our ancestors saw the stars and asked, "Who are we? Why are we here?" What lies beyond the sky was our first storybook, our first map, our first mystery. It gave birth to myths, religions, and philosophies. It taught sailors to navigate oceans. It inspired mathematicians to chart the movement of planets. It pushed inventors to create telescopes and scientists to imagine universes beyond our own. The stars have always been more than lights. They have been teachers, guides, and dreams. To lose space is to silence those teachers, to close that book, to dim those lights. Think of what the sight of Earth from space has meant to humanity. In 1968, when astronauts aboard Apollo 8 looked back and captured the first full image of Earth rising above the moon's horizon, the world changed. For the first time, humanity saw itself as one, not as nations, not as divisions, but as a fragile blue sphere suspended in darkness. That image ignited the environmental movement, inspired peace, and reminded us of our shared home. To lose space is to lose the ability to see ourselves in that way again. It is to shrink our perspective back to borders, walls, and conflicts, forgetting that we are one people on one planet. Consider the way children look at the stars. For a child, space is magic. It is endless possibility. It sparks curiosity that leads to science, engineering, art, and exploration. A boy or girl gazing at the moon may one day become a scientist designing medicines, or an engineer building bridges, or an artist painting visions of the future. Space is the seed of creativity. If we lose space, if the night sky becomes nothing more than an empty dome without wonder, what happens to that child's dream? We risk raising generations without that spark, generations who no longer look up in awe, but only down at the ground beneath them. And when humanity stops dreaming, it stops advancing. Space exploration has always been about more than rockets and astronauts. It has been about showing what human beings can do when they refuse to accept limits. When Yuri Gagarin became the first human in orbit, the world gasped, not just because a man had traveled beyond Earth, but because it meant humanity could go beyond what seemed impossible. When Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon, he did not just place a foot on gray dust. He placed hope in the hearts of millions. People who never cared about science suddenly cared. People who thought limits were permanent suddenly saw them broken. Inspiration spread like wildfire, and that inspiration fueled innovation across every field of human endeavor. To lose space would be to smother that fire. It would be to tell humanity, you cannot go further, you cannot dream higher, you cannot break limits anymore. It would be to confine us to a single planet, a single perspective, a single horizon, and confinement over time kills ambition. The story of humanity has always been the story of breaking barriers, oceans crossed, mountains climbed, skies flown. Space is the next barrier, the highest of them all. If we abandon it, if we lose it, we abandon the very essence of human progress. But the danger is not only in losing the ability to explore, it is in losing the stories that exploration creates. Think of how many young people were inspired by the space race, by images of astronauts floating in orbit, by rovers crawling across Mars, by telescopes capturing galaxies billions of light years away. Those stories do not only create scientists, they create dreamers in every field. A child inspired by the stars might never build a rocket, but may build a new company, a new technology, a new piece of art. Inspiration from space spills into every corner of society. To lose it would not only shrink our scientific horizons, but our cultural horizons as well. Consider the arts, painters, writers, musicians. Countless creators have looked at the cosmos and found their muse. Van Gogh's Starry Night, the poetry of Rumi, the novels of science fiction authors, all are born from looking up. The stars gave us metaphors for love, for destiny, for the divine. If space is lost to us, if it becomes forgotten or unreachable, our culture loses one of its richest wells of creativity, and without creativity, humanity becomes not only less inspired but less human. And what of unity? Space has often been the one place where nations have put aside differences. During the Cold War, at the height of suspicion between the United States and the Soviet Union, astronauts and cosmonauts still shook hands in orbit. The International Space Station today is a beacon of cooperation, with scientists from across the globe living together, working together, proving that we can rise above conflict when we share a dream. To lose space is to lose that laboratory of peace. It is to return cooperation back to Earth, where divisions often triumph over unity. Inspiration is not just emotional, it is practical. It leads to breakthroughs that change daily life. The technologies developed for space exploration have given us countless innovations, advanced materials, medical devices, water purification systems, weather forecasting, global communication, even the very GPS in our pockets. These were not born out of seeking convenience. They were born out of dreaming bigger. Inspiration fuels invention. Remove the dream, and invention slows. Humanity without inspiration becomes stagnant, content to survive but not to thrive. Let us imagine what it means if inspiration dies, a world where children no longer dream of becoming astronauts, a world where science is seen not as wonder but as burden, a world where exploration is considered wasteful instead of noble. In such a world, the great challenges of humanity, climate change, disease, poverty, become harder to solve because the people who might have grown up to tackle them never felt the spark that drove them to try. Inspiration is not a luxury, it is a necessity for progress. Without it, we risk raising generations who accept limits instead of breaking them. We must remember, too, that inspiration gives hope. For a child growing up in poverty, the sight of rockets reaching the stars can mean, even I can dream. For a person trapped in hardship, the knowledge that humanity has touched the moon can mean, there is always something greater. Space gives us hope that tomorrow can be better, that the human story is still unfolding, that the universe is not closed to us. To lose space is to lose that hope, and a humanity without hope is a humanity in decline. Some may argue that dreams are not as important as survival, that inspiration is a luxury compared to food or water, but history proves otherwise. Humanity has survived countless challenges not only because of resources, but because of vision. It was vision that built ships to cross oceans, vision that built machines to fly, vision that built vaccines to save millions. Vision is survival, inspiration is survival. To strip it away is to weaken the human spirit, to prepare for decline rather than growth. Think again of the Apollo missions. At their peak, they cost billions of dollars, and many critics asked why we were spending so much on the moon while people starved on Earth. But what those critics did not see was that Apollo inspired generations who later built technologies that fed millions, cured diseases, and created industries. Inspiration has ripple effects beyond imagination. When a society dreams, it grows. When it stops dreaming, it shrinks. If we lose space, we risk becoming a civilization that no longer looks outward, but only inward. We risk turning our gaze from the stars to our screens, from the infinite to the trivial. We risk a world where ambition is replaced by distraction, where exploration is replaced by consumption, and in such a world humanity may not collapse immediately, but it will wither. Slowly, silently, without the fire of inspiration, we would decline. The loss of inspiration is not dramatic like the loss of satellites or the collapse of navigation. It does not strike in a single moment. It fades gradually like a flame running out of fuel. Generations grow up without looking up, without believing in something greater. And one day we wake up and realize that humanity has become smaller, not because the universe shrank, but because our vision did. That is why space matters, not only for technology, not only for security, but for the soul of humanity. To preserve space is to preserve wonder. To lose it is to lose the spark that makes us reach higher, try harder, and believe more deeply. The stars are not just above us, they are within us, guiding our imagination, shaping our culture, and fueling our progress. So when we ask what happens if we lose space, let us remember this. We lose not only machines but meaning. We lose not only satellites but stories. We lose not only exploration but inspiration. And without inspiration, humanity is not truly alive. That is why we must never let the fire die. We must protect space not only as a resource but as a dream, because a world without space is a world without wonder, and a world without wonder is a world without a future. When we think about Earth, our home, it is easy to imagine it as infinite. The oceans stretch endlessly, the forests seem boundless, the mountains tower as if immortal, and beneath our feet lies a crust rich with minerals, fuel, and soil that has supported humanity for thousands of years. Yet, the uncomfortable truth is that Earth is not infinite. It is finite, bounded, and vulnerable, and as our species grows in number, in consumption, and in ambition, we are beginning to reach the limits of what this single planet can provide. The question then arises, what happens to Earth's future if we lose space, if we cut ourselves off from the possibilities beyond our atmosphere? The answer is sobering. We would find ourselves locked within the walls of a resource cage, struggling to sustain civilization's growth and eventually its survival. Every major step in human progress has been tied to the discovery of new resources or the expansion of access to them. From the first stone tools to the harnessing of fire, from the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution, humanity has thrived by finding new ways to use the earth. But each leap has also pushed us closer to the edge of exhaustion. Consider fossil fuels, for example. They powered industry, transportation, and electricity, but they also polluted our air and contributed to climate change. Metals mined from the earth have built our cities, our machines, and our technologies, but many of these resources are scarce and difficult to replenish. Freshwater supplies are dwindling, farmland is straining under pressure, and ecosystems are collapsing under the weight of deforestation, overfishing, and pollution. Now, some argue that technological innovation can solve these problems. And to a certain extent it can. Renewable energy is reducing dependence on fossil fuels. Recycling and efficiency can stretch the life of metals and plastics. agricultural advancements can improve food production. Yet no matter how efficient we become, there is still a fundamental truth: the earth has only so much to give. Once we strip its mines, drain its aquifers, and degrade its soils, no amount of innovation can conjure something from nothing. Without space, without the possibility of looking beyond Earth for new resources, we are destined to confront hard ceilings to our growth. Space, however, offers a release valve to this mounting pressure. Beyond our atmosphere lies not only a frontier of exploration but also an ocean of opportunity. The asteroids that drift through our solar system are not just rocks. They are treasure chests filled with metals like iron, nickel, cobalt, and even platinum, group elements that are rare on Earth. Some estimates suggest that a single asteroid could contain more metal than has been mined in all of human history. Imagine the transformative impact of tapping into these resources: industries freed from scarcity, economies driven by abundance, and a shift away from destructive mining practices that scar our planet's surface. Then there is the moon. Long thought of as a barren world, we now know it holds deposits of water ice in its polar regions. Water in space is more than just a necessity for survival. It can be broken down into hydrogen and oxygen, the very ingredients of rocket fuel. The moon could become a refueling station, a stepping stone for deeper space exploration, and a hub of resources that might sustain human outposts. Similarly, Mars offers hints of water beneath its surface and a potential environment where, with enough innovation, humans might one day live. Even beyond planets and asteroids, the energy of the sun itself provides a nearly infinite resource. On Earth, our solar panels are limited by clouds, night, and atmosphere. In space, solar energy is constant, unfiltered, and unimaginably abundant. Space-based solar power systems could one day beam clean, renewable energy back to Earth, reducing our dependence on polluting fossil fuels and ensuring an uninterrupted supply of energy for billions of people. Without space, however, all of this remains unreachable. We would be left with the dwindling resources of Earth, forced into increasingly desperate measures to extract and consume what little remains. Wars over resources could become more common. Inequality could grow as the richest nations hoard what is left. Ecological collapse could accelerate as forests are razed for land, oceans are emptied of fish, and minerals are mined from even the most fragile environments. Imagine a world where entire regions are uninhabitable due to water scarcity, where energy shortages cripple economies, and where progress slows not because we lack ideas, but because we lack materials to turn those ideas into reality. That is the grim vision of Earth's future without space. Moreover, the psychological impact of being confined to a shrinking world cannot be overlooked. Humanity thrives on horizons, on the promise of something beyond. If we resign ourselves to a closed Earth, hemmed in by limits, we risk not only material stagnation, but also spiritual stagnation. The dream of space is not just about metal and water. It is about the sense that humanity can always go further, that there is always another step to take. Lose that, and we may lose part of what makes us human. Yet, space is not just about escape, it is about balance. By accessing resources beyond Earth, we can reduce the strain on our planet. Mining an asteroid for metals means fewer open pit mines scarring the Earth's surface. Harnessing solar energy from orbit means fewer power plants belching carbon into the atmosphere. Establishing outposts on the Moon or Mars could relieve the population pressure on Earth, giving ecosystems time to recover. In this way, space exploration is not a rejection of Earth, but a way to protect it. There are, of course, challenges. Mining asteroids, building habitats, and launching large-scale space infrastructure are no small feats. They require enormous investment, technological breakthroughs, and international cooperation. But every great endeavor in human history has seemed impossible until it was achieved. The first seafarers who left the safety of the shore, the explorers who crossed continents, the engineers who built the first aircraft, all faced the same doubts. Today, space is our new ocean, our new frontier, and the risks of not pursuing it are far greater than the risks of trying. If we lose space, we lose the chance to redefine human civilization. We resign ourselves to a zero, some future where nations fight over scraps and societies are divided by scarcity. If we embrace space, we open the door to a future of abundance, where Earth can heal and humanity can grow beyond the limits of one small world. So, when we ask what happens if we lose space, the answer is clear. We lose growth, we lose opportunity, and we lose the possibility of solving the most pressing challenges of our time. But when we commit to space, we commit to a vision of Earth's future that is sustainable, hopeful, and expansive. The choice is ours, and the time to make it is now. When we speak of the future of Earth and humanity, it is tempting to focus on the immediate, the challenges of today's economy, the conflicts of nations, the crises of climate change, and the ever-accelerating pace of technology. Yet beyond these pressing concerns lies a greater question, one that defines not just the next decade but the very fate of our species. Can humanity survive in the long run if we are bound forever to Earth? To understand the gravity of this question, we must imagine a future where space is lost to us, not because it disappears, but because we fail to reach for it, to protect it, or to embrace it. What happens to Earth's future if space is denied to us? The answer is as stark as it is sobering. We gamble with extinction, leaving our species and all that it has achieved at the mercy of forces beyond our control. The truth is that Earth, for all its beauty, is not invulnerable. It is a fragile world orbiting an ordinary star in a vast and indifferent universe. From the beginning of time, it has been shaped by cataclysms. Asteroids have slammed into it with the power to wipe out nearly all life, as happened 65 million years ago when a rock from the sky ended the reign of the dinosaurs. Supervolcanoes have erupted, plunging the Earth into cold and darkness for years at a time. The planet's climate has swung wildly between ice ages and scorching heat, and beyond Earth the sun itself is not eternal. It will one day expand into a red giant, swallowing the inner planets and reducing this blue world to cinders. Against such immense forces, humanity is but a fragile thread, easily broken if we remain tied to one place. Consider the asteroid threat more closely. Astronomers track thousands of near-Earth objects, and while most pose no immediate danger, it takes only one impact to end civilization as we know it. Without space technology, satellites, telescopes, and missions capable of diverting asteroids, we would be blind to these threats, powerless to defend ourselves. Losing space means losing our shield, leaving us vulnerable to the same fate that befell the dinosaurs. It is sobering to realize that our survival may depend on the ability to detect and deflect a rock hurtling through space, and without space exploration, we will never have that ability. Then there is climate. Earth's climate is inherently unstable, shaped by factors both internal and external. In recent centuries, human activity has accelerated warming, threatening ecosystems, coastlines, and human societies. Yet even if we master climate change through technology and discipline, the natural cycles of the planet will continue. Ice ages will return, volcanic eruptions will alter the skies, the sun itself, through its fluctuations, can heat or cool the planet. To remain confined to Earth is to remain at the mercy of these cycles. With space, however, we have options. Colonies on the Moon or Mars, or stations orbiting Earth, could act as refuges if our planet suffers catastrophic shifts. Without space, there is no refuge, no backup, no plan B. Beyond natural disasters, there is the possibility of self-inflicted catastrophe. Humanity is a creative species, but with creativity comes danger. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, artificial intelligence, all carry risks that could spiral out of control. A single miscalculation, a single chain of events, could plunge Earth into darkness. If we have no presence in space, if all of humanity's eggs remain in the same basket, then one disaster could wipe us out completely. Space is not just a realm of wonder, it is a safeguard against our own flaws. By spreading humanity across multiple worlds, we ensure that no single disaster, natural or man-made, can destroy us entirely. There is also the inescapable reality of cosmic time. Our sun, steady in life, giving today, will not last forever. In about 5 billion years it will expand and Earth will be lost. That may seem like an eternity, but on the scale of the cosmos it is a fleeting moment. Even long before that, rising solar radiation will boil away Earth's oceans and render it uninhabitable. If we lose space, if we give up on reaching beyond our atmosphere, we are choosing extinction in advance. We are saying that humanity's story, with all its struggles and triumphs, will end here on this one small world. But if we embrace space, then our story can continue not for millions of years, but for billions across planets, moons, and perhaps even other stars. The philosophical weight of this question is enormous. Every human being who has ever lived, every culture, every language, every work of art, every dream, and every love has existed here on Earth. If we stay confined, all of that richness is vulnerable, hanging by a thread that can be cut by an asteroid, a volcano, or a war. To lose space is to risk losing everything we are. Yet to embrace space is to preserve not just our biology, but our legacy. Imagine a future where human civilizations flourish across multiple worlds, each carrying fragments of Earth's cultures, each ensuring that the music, the art, the wisdom, and the spirit of humanity endures. In such a future, Earth becomes not a prison but a birthplace, the place we came from but not the place where we end. Some may argue that this vision is too distant, too speculative, that humanity should focus on the problems of the here and now. It is true, we cannot ignore hunger, poverty, or injustice, but to frame space as a distraction is to misunderstand its role. The technologies developed for space exploration often return to Earth in life, saving ways from satellite communication to medical imaging. More importantly, space is not about abandoning Earth. It is about ensuring that Earth has a future. If we lose space, the problems of Earth become traps with no escape. If we embrace space, the problems of Earth become challenges we can confront with new resources, new energy, and new perspectives. The threat to humanity's long-term survival is not a single event but a spectrum of risks. Some are sudden and catastrophic, like an asteroid impact. Others are gradual and creeping, like climate change or resource depletion. But whether fast or slow, all these risks are magnified if we remain Earth-bound. Losing space means surrendering control to fate, accepting that our survival depends entirely on forces we cannot master. Pursuing space means reclaiming agency, taking responsibility for our destiny, and ensuring that humanity is not just a fleeting phenomenon but a lasting presence in the universe. In the end, the question of space is not just about survival in a practical sense. It is about meaning. Do we want humanity to be a brief flicker in the history of the cosmos, here and gone in the blink of an eye? Or do we want to be a species that endures, that carries its dreams and ideas into the far future, that leaves a mark not just on Earth but on the stars? If we lose space, the first path is inevitable extinction, whether in centuries or millennia. If we embrace space, the second path is open, survival, growth, and legacy stretching across the galaxy. So when we ask what happens if we lose space, the answer is clear. We lose more than resources. We lose more than inspiration. We lose our very future. We lose the possibility of survival itself. The Earth is beautiful, but it is not forever. To secure the future of humanity, we must look up, we must reach out, and we must never let go of space. For in its vastness lies not only our safety but our destiny. When we consider the question of Earth's future and the role space plays in it, it is not enough to talk only about opportunities or dangers. We must also ask ourselves what responsibility comes with reaching into space, and what choices we must make today to ensure that this vast frontier is not lost to us. To lose space would not mean its literal disappearance. It would mean losing access, losing freedom, losing the ability to use it wisely. It would mean polluting it, militarizing it, or neglecting it until it becomes a graveyard of broken satellites and missed opportunities. If that happens, Earth's future will be one of limitation, conflict, and decline. But if we preserve and protect space, if we recognize it as a shared heritage and treat it with the respect it deserves, then we unlock not only survival and growth, but a vision of unity and destiny that transcends borders and generations. Space is often imagined as infinite, yet the truth is that near-Earth space, the region of orbit where our satellites travel, is surprisingly fragile. Already, thousands of pieces of debris circle our planet, fragments of old rockets, broken satellites, and even tiny shards that can move at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour. Each piece, no matter how small, can damage or destroy spacecraft. The more debris we create, the greater the risk of collisions, which in turn generate even more debris, a chain reaction known as the Kessler syndrome. If we are careless, we could trap ourselves in a shell of junk, making it impossible to launch new satellites or explore beyond Earth. Losing space could come not from lack of ambition, but from negligence. That is why protecting space from pollution is not optional. It is essential for the continuation of modern life on Earth and for the dreams of exploration beyond it. Beyond debris, there is the growing risk of weaponization. Space has always been a strategic high ground, and nations have long recognized its importance for communication, navigation, and defense. But as technology advances, so does the temptation to turn space into a battlefield. Anti-satellite weapons, orbital lasers, and other military tools threaten to make space a domain of conflict. If war extends into space, the consequences will not only be immediate destruction, but long-term damage to humanity's ability to use it at all. One nation's attempt to dominate the skies could ruin space for everyone, scattering debris and sparking global tensions. To lose space to militarization is to turn humanity's highest dream into its darkest danger. Preserving and protecting space means choosing cooperation over conflict. It means building international agreements to keep space a peaceful domain where scientific exploration and human settlement are prioritized over weapons and rivalry. Just as the Antarctic Treaty preserved a continent for science, so too must we create treaties and norms to safeguard space for humanity as a whole. This is not idealism, it is survival. Without shared rules, the scramble for control could end in ruin. With shared rules, space can become a place of unity, where nations work together toward goals that benefit all of Earth. Protection also means responsibility in how we use resources. As humanity looks to asteroids, the Moon, and Mars for metals, water, and energy, we must avoid repeating the mistakes we made on Earth. On our planet, unchecked exploitation has scarred ecosystems, fueled inequality, and sparked conflict. If we treat space only as a mine to be emptied, we risk creating new divisions, with a few powerful nations or corporations hoarding wealth while the rest of humanity is left behind. Preserving space means ensuring that its resources are used sustainably and equitably, with the understanding that space belongs not to the powerful few, but to all humanity. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 declared that space is the province of all mankind. Living up to that promise is part of protecting space. Yet preservation is not only about rules and laws, it is also about culture and vision. If people see space only as a distant, irrelevant place, they will not care if it is polluted or militarized. But if they see it as part of our shared destiny, as the pathway to survival and hope, then they will fight to protect it. Education, inspiration, and imagination are therefore as important as policy. Every child who looks up at the night sky and dreams of the stars is a guardian of space. Every citizen who understands that their weather forecast or phone call depends on satellites is a protector of orbit. Preserving space means building a culture that values it, not just for its beauty but for its necessity. Think also of justice between generations. The choices we make today about space will echo for centuries. If we pollute orbit, if we weaponize it, if we close it off through neglect or greed, then we rob our children and grandchildren of their inheritance. They will live in a world where the dream of space is broken, where humanity is trapped on Earth with dwindling resources and endless risks. But if we protect space, we give them the opposite, a world of opportunity, safety, and inspiration. The responsibility is ours, and history will judge whether we were wise enough to carry it. The urgency cannot be overstated. Space is not a luxury, it is the backbone of our modern world and the key to our survival. Already, satellites guide our airplanes, monitor our crops, coordinate disaster response, and connect billions of people. Imagine losing all of that because we fail to manage debris or prevent conflict. Now imagine what we stand to gain if we succeed: a future of clean energy beamed from orbit, new resources from asteroids, habitats on other worlds, and knowledge that expands the human spirit. That is the choice before us. Protecting space also requires investment. Too often, people argue that space programs are too expensive, that money should be spent on Earth's problems instead. But this argument misses the point. Protecting space is protecting Earth. Every dollar spent on monitoring debris, on building safer rockets, on researching sustainable space mining, is a dollar spent on securing the future of our planet. Neglect is far more costly than action. To lose space through underinvestment would be a failure of imagination and responsibility, and so when we think of Earth's future, we must think not only of what space offers, but of what it demands. It demands that we treat it not as an endless wilderness to be exploited, but as a fragile commons to be preserved. It demands that we work together across nations and cultures to keep it peaceful and open. It demands that we inspire future generations to see themselves as citizens not only of Earth, but of the universe, and it demands that we act now before neglect or conflict closes the door. The call to preserve and protect space is ultimately a call to preserve and protect ourselves. Earth cannot survive in isolation. Its safety, its growth, its very existence in the long term depend on space. If we lose space, we lose progress, security, inspiration, resources, and survival itself. But if we protect it, we gain a future of abundance, cooperation, and endurance. This is the choice humanity faces in this century. It is not a choice between Earth and space. It is a choice between a narrow, fragile future and a vast, resilient one. Let us choose wisely. Let us choose to protect the skies above us, to keep them clear of conflict and debris, to keep them open for exploration and hope. For in doing so, we protect not just the heavens but the earth itself, and we ensure that the story of humanity does not end here, but continues, bright, bold, and infinite, among the stars.